Countries come in all shapes and sizes, ranging from quite circular countries like Sierra Leone to squarish countries like Egypt. You then have countries that are absolutely tiny, like say Liechtenstein, which you can barely see on a world map, whereas countries like Russia and Canada stand out like a sore thumb. The shape and sizes of countries are determined by historical borders, geographical influences, and political decisions made by governments and treaties. Perhaps one of the best examples of a political decision influencing a country's shape is Equatorial Guinea. It easily has one of the most unnatural shapes on Earth. Before Equatorial Guinea was Equatorial Guinea, the region consisted of several different territories under Spanish and French colonial administration. Over time, these territories were combined to form the independent nation of Equatorial Guinea in 1968. The borders that were created were quite literally drawn with straight lines on a world map, with little to no regard for the local geography or ethnic groups, ultimately leading to the creation of more geometric straight line borders. Looking at Africa as a whole, there are many countries across the continent who have a similar story with regards to geometric straight lines, particularly in the northern half of the region. I'm not sure if there's a universal answer for this, but which country do you think has the most rugged country shape? Or in other words, a country with non-straight line borders? There are definitely a dozen or two candidates, but I'm going to say that Chile could take the win here. If you can think of a better example, of course pop it in the comments below. Chile is easily one of the most unique countries in the world in terms of its shape. It is extremely long but narrow. In particular, its border with Argentina in the southern part of the country is especially rugged. There are very few straight lines and many points where its border intrudes or extrudes into Argentina. Very few people live in this region, with some 1.5 or so people per kilometre calling this region home. Bhutan, a Buddhist isolated kingdom nestled in the eastern Himalayas, is landlocked by two countries, India and China, the world's most and second most populated countries. But what is so special about the shape of this country? It looks fairly normal, right? Well, as just mentioned, it is a landlocked country. And as mentioned earlier in the video, historical and political factors often lead to landlocked countries having straight lines for borders. However, Bhutan has nothing of the sort. Similar to Chile, most of its border with China and India is rugged and irregular. For reference, this is how Bhutan's country shape compares to, say, Mali, a landlocked country within northwest Africa, which was once a French colony named French Sudan. A bizarre and sometimes controversial geography fact is the country who has the second most coastline on Earth. Canada understandably ranks first, so second place has to be Indonesia, Russia, or perhaps Brazil, right? These are all huge countries with what looks like plenty of coastline. Well, this is completely true. They are all huge and do have lots of coastline. However, the country with the second most coastline on Earth isn't even an island and ranks as the 61st largest country on the planet. It is Norway. The reason why this is rather controversial is due to what is known as the coastline paradox, which stipulates that coastlines do not have well-defined lengths. A good example to explain this is the UK. If you were to measure the UK's coastline with 200-kilometre intervals, it would look like this. Whereas with 50-kilometre intervals, it would look more like this. The former would give the country a coastline of 2,400 kilometres and the latter 3,400. There are 44 countries which have a coastline of 0, which of course makes them landlocked. The country with the least amount of coastline, excluding those with 0, is Monaco with 4.1 kilometres. Brunei is another country with an interesting shape. The country is found on the island of Borneo and is surrounded by Malaysia. What makes this country's shape so interesting is that it is split up into two parts. Historically speaking, Brunei was once a powerful sultanate that controlled a large territory. Over time, through various historical agreements, treaties, and colonial influences, parts of its territory were ceded or became parts of other countries. For example, parts of Brunei were ceded to the British North Borneo Company, which led to the division of its territory. There is actually a bridge which connects the two parts of the country together, which crosses Malaysian waters. Similar to the Norway example earlier, another geography fact which doesn't seem right and is slightly controversial is the country with the most islands on Earth. Again, this has to be a country like Canada, the Philippines, or Indonesia, right? Well, again, this is true. Those three countries all rank within the top 10 countries with the most islands. The Philippines, an island nation, for example, has around 7,600 islands in total. However, this doesn't even come close to the country which ranks number 1, a country who on a world map looks like it has very few islands. The country in question is Sweden, which incredibly is said to have around 267,000 islands. But why is this the case? How does this Nordic nation have so many islands? Well, unlike most of the rest of the world who is worrying about sea level rise and losing their land, Sweden has the opposite. Sweden is actually rising above sea level due to thawing from the Ice Age and other geological activity. Sweden also has numerous archipelagos along its coastline. These archipelagos are made up of clusters of islands. Its coastline is also highly irregular and indented, with many bays, fjords, and inlets. This creates numerous opportunities for the formation of islands. The country also has many freshwater lakes, which have their own islands too. Norway, as we spoke about earlier, is also a very rugged country in terms of its coastline, which results in it ranking second for the most islands. Third place is yet another Nordic country, Finland, which has around 178,000. This incredibly means that these three countries together have more islands than the rest of the world combined. There are said to be some 900,000 islands across the planet, with around 685,000 of those being found in the three countries just mentioned. Now, according to AI, Sweden and Nepal share the highest percentage country shape overlap on Earth. Obviously, Sweden is larger than Nepal, so if you were to upscale the latter and overlay it over the former, apparently there is an 86% overlap match. Other countries which have similar shapes when overlapped are Finland to the UK, or Great Britain specifically, and the US to Saudi Arabia. If you were to combine New Zealand's two main landmasses, it would look like this. Now, does this new New Zealand country shape remind you of another country? Perhaps another island country found in Eastern Asia? It is Japan. Again, it's not identical of course, because that would be kind of crazy, but I can certainly see a resemblance in terms of its shape. Now, can you guess which country this is? I'll give you a clue. It's a Baltic country. It is of course Lithuania, which sits at the bottom of the Baltic region underneath Latvia. Can you think of a particular place on Earth that it kind of resembles? For me, it looks kind of like Africa, if Africa was compressed slightly. Can you guess which country this is? At first glance, some of you might have thought India. However, this is actually an African nation. I'd be seriously impressed if you know which one. So this is actually Burundi, a rather unknown landlocked country found in central-ish Eastern Africa. Of course, it isn't an exact match to India, but I can definitely see some resemblance. Now, we can't talk about country shapes and not mention Italy. Italy has perhaps one of the most notorious country shapes on Earth. I'm sure you've all seen this before, but of course it looks like a boot or heel kicking some sort of object, in this case the island of Sicily. Alright, here's a quick question for you. Which country has the most iconic or perhaps recognizable country shape on Earth? Of course, there is no answer to this, as it is completely subjective. For me, I'm going to say Australia, simply because it is such a large and relatively remote country. With it being an island nation, it stands out like a sore thumb amongst the oceans and seas that surround it. Now, let's compare Australia to, say, this country. Chances are you have no idea what this country is, but you can instantly recognize Australia by its shape. The mysterious country in question, by the way, is Zambia. If you did know that, that is pretty darn impressive. The shape of a country is kind of like a flag. Let me explain. When you see these flags, for example, there will be connotations, thoughts, and opinions running through your head. Depending on your personal circumstances, these thoughts may be positive or negative. Well, the same applies if I was to show you some country shapes. You may instantly recognize which country it is, and those same thoughts and opinions may pop into your head. Speaking of country shapes and flags, there are actually two countries that have their own country shapes on their flag. Both of them are coincidentally controversial, being Cyprus and Kosovo. Only around half of all countries on Earth recognize Kosovo as an independent nation, which means that the country shape on its flag technically doesn't exist or mean anything to half of the countries in the world. Cyprus is also controversial as it was divided into two parts in 1974. The southern part is the Republic of Cyprus. This is where the majority of the population lives and is internationally recognized as the legitimate government. The northern part is Northern Cyprus, which is only recognized as an independent state by Turkey. So from a Turkish standpoint, the flag of Cyprus is technically wrong, as the map shown on the flag consists of both the north and south. So there we have it, some interesting country shapes from around the world. Let us know if you can think of any others, and also let us know what your favourite country shape is. And as always, thank you very much for watching.